getting ready to open up the line now. Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listening-only mode into the question-and-answer session of today's conference. At that time, you may press star 1 on your phone to ask a question. I would like to turn the conference over to Nicole Wheelwright. Thank you. You may begin.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Very good. This is the City of Beaumont. This is the City Council Workshop, July 28, 2020, and this is a regular session. Would you kindly do a roll call, please?
Sure. Can I call this meeting open at 5:02?
Oh, 502.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember White?
Here.
Councilmember Martinez?
Here.
Councilmember Carroll?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Laura?
Here.
Mayor Santos?
Here. Obviously, all the councils is here. We'll just, do the Pledge of Allegiance. Chief Sean Tillis, could you lead us, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God.
God, individual.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. Okay, I will do the public comment period, items not on the agenda. Due to current health and safety orders, we're encouraging members of the public to maintain participation in our meetings by using the following options: email comments, phone-in comments, and in-person subject to applicable health orders. All of the details for this option can be found in the front of agenda and will also be displayed on your screen throughout the meeting. Do we have a public comment on this item?
Operator, do we have anyone on the line that would like to speak?
Thank you. If you'd like to ask a question, please press star 1, unmute your phone, and record your name clearly. If you need to withdraw your question, press star 2. There are currently no questions in queue at this time.
And I have no written comments.
Okay, very good. We'll just move on our action items. Approval of all ordinances and resolution be read by title only. Item number 1, which is the only item we have for today, the National Community Survey results. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This really is, I think, a pretty important day for the city. We're happy to be able to relay to you the results of a community survey that we really initiated back in January. I guess it's interesting timing to start a community survey, so I'm sure that may have had a little bit of bearing on some things that we're seeing in some of our results. But anyway, this is a great step forward in that it gives us a snapshot in terms of the livability view of livability within our community from our citizens today. And it creates a platform, should council decide in the future, to try to update this, to monitor how feelings in the community may have changed or whether we've made progress in some of these specific areas that are identified here. With that, I'd like to turn this over to Ms. Ashley Starr to give us an introduction and then to turn it over to the National Community Survey team. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Okay, Ashley.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
So on January 7th, implementation of the National Community Survey was approved. The survey took place between April and May of this year, and we're excited to have the National Research Center here to present the results. So I'd like to introduce Heather Locke and Demema Mann to present their findings. Okay. Do you want to go ahead and do your screen share, Heather? Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hello
Sorry
there.
we couldn't be there in person. Nice to see you virtually. Thank you for bearing with us here.
Thank you.
So as was previously said, we recently conducted the National Community Survey, or the NCS as we refer to it, for the city of Beaumont. The NCS is a standardized omnibus resident survey tool that was developed by our firm, National Research Center, back in 2001. And since then, we've been partnered on that initiative with ICMA, the International City and County Managers Association. And we've conducted the NCS for hundreds of communities across the US. The NCS broadly is designed to measure all facets of community livability that you can see here on this screen. If you've had a chance to look over the reports, you'll see that we broadly organize the reports around these 10 facets that we've identified through models of community livability. The survey overall is designed to be mostly standardized with mostly fixed questions, and that allows us to provide you not only with your results for each of the survey questions, but also to have created an average rating or a benchmark for each item on the survey. So that helps put your results into context. We're able to tell you if your rating for a specific item is similar to the national benchmark, higher than it, or lower than it. As hopefully with time, this is the start of a trend line, and we'll also then be able to help put the results into further context by giving you your trends over time. As mentioned, this is the first time that we have conducted the NCS for the city of Beaumont. It was a scientific sample of 2,500 households. All households within city limits were eligible to be part of the sample. We addressed for non-response bias in the sampling process. We statistically weight the data once we get it back. We look at the most recent census data available for the city and compare that to the socio-demographic questions on the survey and apply some statistical weights to the data. So with that, we are fairly certain, 95% certain, in fact, that if we had heard from all residents within the city of Beaumont, the results would be accurate within plus or minus 4%. So that's that plus or minus 4% margin of error. The overall response rate that we saw in the city is a very solid response rate. Typically, we are striving for a 5% margin of error in this kind of study. So the fact that Beaumont achieved a 4% margin of error is an even higher level of precision. So that's great. This just is a map to give you a rough idea of our national benchmarking database. We have about 600 communities in that benchmarking database that Beaumont's results are being compared to. They vary widely in size and geographic location. Here's just a quick snapshot of overall how Beaumont's ratings stacked up to that national benchmarking database. Most of the ratings were similar to the 78 question items were similar to the national benchmark and on par with those comparison communities. One was higher and 58 were lower. Beaumont also chose to have a set of custom benchmark comparisons. And so this is a subset of the jurisdictions in our database. Here's a snapshot of how the city stacked up to that. And that subset was determined by city staff, and it was jurisdictions in NRC's benchmarking database that had populations between 40 and 100,000 and had median household incomes of $70,000 to $90,000 per year. Here are those 10 facets of livability again. And this is a quality and importance matrix. We ask about these specific facets. We ask about components of them, but we also ask specifically about each of these 10 facets on the survey twice. First, we ask residents to rate the overall quality of each facet in the city of Beaumont, and that's on a scale of excellent, good, fair, or poor, as are most of the qualitative questions on the survey. And then we also ask them to rate the importance, how important it is for the Beaumont community to focus on each of these facets in the coming 2 years. And that's on a scale of essential, very important, somewhat important, or not at all important. And so what this matrix is helping show, for instance, you can see here in this top left box, the facets of community design and health and wellness, when compared to the benchmarks, were relatively lower quality, but higher importance to Beaumont residents. The facets of safety and natural environment were of similar quality and similar importance. Inclusivity and engagement was of similar quality and lower importance. Now what I'm going to do is go over the key findings from the Community Livability Report. There's a lot of data in these reports, a lot of different ways you can look at it and discuss it. In the interest of brevity and not trying not to keep us all here all night, I'm just going to go over what we found to be the key takeaways when looking at the data. And these relate to the key findings in the livability report that we provided to you. After we go through these, I'll be happy to answer as many questions as folks may have. The first key finding is that residents appreciate many aspects of living in Beaumont. Quality of life ratings tended to be high. At least 3/4 or 75% of residents gave excellent or good ratings to the city as a place to live, to their overall quality of life, and to their neighborhoods as places to live. These ratings were all very high and on par with comparison communities, both in the national and custom subset. At least 8 in 10 respondents said they were likely to recommend living in the city and that they plan to remain in Beaumont for the next 5 years. And these rates were also on par with comparison communities. When looking at some aspects of community design, you can see that a majority gave excellent or good ratings to the overall quality of new development in the city, to well-designed neighborhoods, and to the variety of housing options. About 4 in 10 giving excellent or good ratings to the availability of affordable quality housing. And while that's a somewhat lower rating, that was also on par with national and custom comparisons, as were all of the items here on this slide. The next key finding is that mobility-related services and traffic flow are areas of high importance to residents and potential opportunity. You can see a majority gave excellent or good ratings to the ease of walking in the city, ease of travel by bicycle, about 4 in 10 giving excellent or good ratings to street cleaning, the overall quality of the transportation system in the city, sidewalk maintenance, and traffic signal timing. Most of these items were similar to the national benchmark comparison. However, the rating for the overall quality of the transportation system was much lower than both the custom and national benchmark comparisons. About half of Beaumont residents reported that they had carpooled, walked, or biked instead of driving alone. This rate was similar to the national benchmark and actually higher than in the custom comparison communities. While most of the questions on the NCS are fixed, as I mentioned, which allows us to provide you with those benchmark comparisons, there was a section on the survey that allowed for questions completely specific to the city. And I'll get more into detail on those, but while we're on the subject of mobility, I wanted to mention some of the items in the custom questions that related back to that theme. When asked about some potential areas for the city to invest resources in the coming 5 years, almost all said it was essential or very important. About 9 in 10 said it was essential or very important for the city to invest in local street and traffic flow improvements, and 8 in 10 thought that it was essential or very important to invest in freeway interchange improvements. When looking at some potential focus areas in the area of mobility, these are some of the standard questions on the survey. You can see about 46% giving excellent or good ratings to traffic enforcement and ease of travel by car. Only about 1/4 giving excellent or good ratings to traffic flow on major streets. These were all lower than the national and custom benchmark comparisons, so could be potential focus areas. There was another question specific to Beaumont that I'll get more into detail on this question in a few more slides, but this was an open-ended question the city chose to add to the survey, where they asked residents in their own words to write in what they thought the top 3 needs or priorities were for the city. And the most commonly cited themes by far had to do with mobility and traffic and street infrastructure and quality. So just kind of echoing the importance that residents placed on this issue. The next key finding is that residents are healthy and prioritize their opportunities for health and wellness. You may remember that the health and wellness category was one of the items that was deemed to be high importance but lower quality in that importance quality matrix I showed you earlier. About 8 in 10 residents said that they considered health and wellness to be a top priority. And this was a rate that was actually higher than what we typically see in other communities. About half gave excellent or good ratings to the overall quality of health and wellness opportunities, to health services, and to the availability of preventative health services. And these were all lower than the national and custom benchmarks. So definitely some room for improvement in those categories. Parks and recreation ratings are a potential another area for opportunity to help move the needle in this area. While a majority gave excellent or good ratings to the overall quality of parks and recreation and to city parks, and about half giving excellent or good ratings to the availability of paths and walking trails and recreation centers or facilities, these ratings did tend to be lower than the national and custom benchmarks. This harkens back to the custom question that I'm going to still get into more detail about, but asking for residents if they supported the city investing resources. About 6 in 10 did support the city investing resources in community center improvements. The final key finding is that Beaumont's economy is also a very high priority for residents, especially given the current climate in terms of what communities. Beaumont's not alone in this, facing as we all face the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis. So almost all residents said that the economy was an essential or very important focus area. That was comparison communities. When looking at some aspects of the economy in Beaumont, about 60% gave excellent or good ratings to the overall quality of businesses and service establishments. About half to economic development services. About a third gave excellent or good ratings to the overall cost of living in the city, and only about a quarter felt optimistic about their personal economic future. These ratings tended to be a mix of similar and lower to the benchmark. Some potential specific areas of opportunity within economy perhaps are the variety of businesses and service establishments in Beaumont. About 4 in 10 gave excellent or good ratings there. And about 3 in 10 or fewer gave positive ratings to the vibrancy of downtown and commercial areas, to shopping opportunities, employment opportunities, the city as a place to visit, and the city as a place to work. And these ratings all tended to be lower than in comparison communities. About half of the respondents we determined were experiencing housing cost stress. This is a much higher rate of housing cost stress than what we typically see. I can share anecdotally, this is a rating that we're seeing in jurisdictions we work with that are also conducting the survey during these extraordinary times that have trend data. We're seeing housing cost levels rise pretty much across the board everywhere. So we don't have a reference point. This is the baseline for Beaumont, but that was high. So now I can go into more detail with the Beaumont specific questions that I mentioned earlier. The first question had to do with information sources. We asked residents how much of a source they considered each of these for obtaining information about the city government. And this was asked on a scale of major source, minor source, or not a source. And you can see that each of these items was at least a minor source, was considered as at least a minor source by a majority of respondents. But up at the top, you can see the most popular sources. Over half citing the city website and city social media accounts as major sources of information. So that's definitely where your residents are most often turning to get their information about the city. Here's the question about support for capital improvement projects. Residents were asked to rate on a scale of essential, very important, somewhat important, or not at all important, how important it would be for the city to invest resources in each of these items you see here. Again, all of them were rated as at least somewhat important by a majority of respondents. So there's support for all of these projects, but there's definitely the strongest levels of support for local street and traffic flow improvements. So echoing what we have seen with the potential improvements desired and importance placed on mobility in the city, followed by the freeway interchange improvements, then followed by expansion of public safety facilities and the parks and community center improvements. This was the final Beaumont specific question on the survey. This was the open-ended question. So this question, residents were able to write in their own responses in their own words. There's a separate report that breaks these responses out by category. We don't edit respondents' comments for grammar or punctuation. It's just exactly as how they were written on the survey. And we've done our best to put these into these categories that you see here. Respondents could pick up to 3 items, so they do not total to 100%. But you can see, as echoed what we were talking about earlier, Street infrastructure and street quality, very top of the list, then followed by mobility and traffic issues, followed by business and employment, having to do with economy again. So just to recap those key findings, it's clear that residents experience a very positive quality of life in the city. Quality of life ratings were high and on par with comparison communities. Residents do prioritize opportunities for health and wellness. Mobility-related services and traffic flow are also areas of high importance to residents and of potential opportunity. And Beaumont's economy is a high priority for residents, especially given the current climate. And Beaumont's not alone in facing that with the COVID-19 crisis. We're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Very good. Thank you so much. That was good. Let's do on the public comments first. Do we have any public comments on this, Nicole?
Operator, do we have any callers on the line that would like to speak?
As a reminder, if you would please press star 1 on your phone and record your name clearly if you have a public comment.
It's not sure.
There are currently no questions in queue at this time.
I have no emailed comments.
Okay, we'll just go ahead and proceed on the council discussion. It's open. Council? You have to unmute. Council Julio Martinez?
Yeah, so we're going to be getting a copy of this PowerPoint, obviously. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's been
Okay.
emailed out.
Just a couple of clarifications on the slide. Can you, back on the key findings number 2, we talked about 42% of the overall transportation system. Are they referring to infrastructure streets? Are they referring to busing and public transportation, or what's that referring to?
So I can read you the way that question is worded on the survey itself. So we use the shorthand, the overall quality of the transportation system. The way we word it on the survey is overall quality of the transportation system, auto, bicycle, foot, bus in Beaumont. So it's meant to be an all-encompassing.
Okay. And I didn't, it was a little quick on the PowerPoint there. I didn't get to really look at the economic challenges much. So you refer to housing stress, 1 in 10. So I guess my question, just general right now, is, of course, this was given in the midst of the COVID. So what do we think, or your interpretation of the effects of the COVID on any of the questioning or the survey results?
It's certainly hard to say for Beaumont because we don't have a baseline that's pre-COVID for these questions, but definitely for other jurisdictions we're working with right now that do have trend data, we are seeing things like optimism about personal economic future on the decline, housing cost stress, increasing. I certainly think the city is not alone in that the kinds of economic challenges the city is likely to be facing are what jurisdictions nationwide are going to be facing right now. Folks having trouble making mortgage and rent payments, loss of employment, that sort of thing.
Can you go back to the slide before this one? Go one more. I'm looking for one that had the bar, the sidebar graph. I don't know if it was in this one. Maybe it was after. It's the one where it showed, it was in this area, but it showed, is that all that was in this one? Maybe it was in the one before that. Then I'm looking at maybe on your essential number 4. 4. You had a bar graph that showed infrastructure, streets, and it was the dark blue graph.
Is that the community design?
I don't know because I don't have a copy
I'm
of the
just looking
PowerPoint.
on. Maybe that one
Okay.
there?
Do you think maybe it was one of the custom questions specific to Beaumont about
Okay, let's try
funding
that.
priorities?
Let's try that.
Thanks for bearing with us.
That's
Sorry,
okay, I
sorry
understand.
if I went fast. It's a
That's
lot
okay.
easier to do this when I'm in the room with everybody.
I know, and I apologize if I sound too testy, but
Oh, no worries. Thanks for your patience.
okay, here we go. Let's start. Okay, this one here. This is one. Okay, not blue, I guess. So this one here showed. So I have a question down. We've been getting a lot of questions on the pool issue. Going down to that enhancements to the municipal pool. So we're looking at 949 residents that responded to this survey, correct? So these percentages then would verify those within those 649 that responded. Is that correct?
Correct. This is from the scientific sample of residents. There was also the opt-in web survey that was available to all respondents, and that's a separate report that's in your packet. So we can see if I didn't look specifically for this question to see how those results differ head to head, but
That's fine. What did that question ask?
so this question, this was a city specific question. It said, please rate how important, if at all, you think it is for the city to invest resources in each of the following capital projects over the next 5 years. So really, as it
Oh, that's just the way
appears
it's
here.
read. Okay.
And you can see, while the enhancements to the municipal pool is at the bottom of the list, it was still rated as at least somewhat important by a majority of respondents. It's just that the other items, tended to have stronger, essential support or very important. But you're not seeing a majority saying it's not important. I think, perhaps given the context of everything else that's happening right now, it fell to the bottom of the list, but it still has at least somewhat support from a majority of respondents.
The only reason I brought that up is because we're having some issues with changing the pool into a splash pad, and I was just wondering what the number is on that, but I can get the percentages there. Okay, Mayor, that's all I have for now.
Very good.
Let someone jump in. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, let me, interject on that. I mean, on the enhancement to the municipal pool. It has an open parenthesis in there, say splash pad, slides, locker room, renovations, and etc. And then, it's not on the slide. Can you, explain that? I mean, because there's a splash pad was included on that municipal pool. That's why there's an 18. I'm not saying that's why we have an 18, but that's part of the questions in there. Would you clarify that?
Yes, you're correct, Mr. Mayor. Just for the visibility on the slide, we did shorten these labels a little bit, but absolutely, the question did read enhancements to the municipal pool, and then in parentheses, splash pad, slides, locker room renovations. So it did include those items.
Right.
Sorry not to be clear on that.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to clarify that. Okay, Council? Let me see whose hand is coming up. Oh, there you go. Okay, Council Carol?
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
In the early slides, and I know this is very difficult with not being in the same room, but if you go back to the very beginning, go back to the first slide. There you go. Get way up there. Okay, you just went past the one I want. Keep going. One more, I think. No.
Was it the matrix, this one?
Yeah, there you go. That's a good one. Okay. When you look at that, and this slide to me, all of the slides are important, but this one shows me the importance and the quality of what they think we already have. And I get that what we've sort of identified with the numbers, when you get into the graphs and you get into the data, that health and wellness, and we talked about all the issues with traffic and mobility and all of that as being critical. But I have a question. And after I ask this question and you explain it to me, I will let the rest of the council members go ahead and ask their questions because I'm going to have to track this through. But you have on here of, let's say, lower importance in that category. You've got education, arts, and culture. And that's in the same column to me as mobility, utilities, the economy, and parks and rec. But yet, when we move forward in the slides and you do measurement through the rest of the slides, I don't see education, arts, and culture show up in any of the slides going forward. And that's defined on this slide as a separate thing from Parks and Rec. And Parks and Rec, every time we see a graphic of that, it's got, you know, a soccer ball, and then we've got for hiking and trails, we've got people riding bikes and things. But there's no continuation on any of the slides that follow this for education, arts, and culture. Can you help me out with that?
Sure. So you're absolutely right. That was a facet that was rated as similar importance and lower quality, as was economy and mobility. I did touch upon economy, mobility, and parks and rec, but not on education, arts, and culture, or on utilities. And really, when we're looking at the key findings, and so the slides were based on the key findings of the livability report. And when we're looking at those, we're just trying to pick out 3 or 4 major themes, rather than talk about each facet. So it's not to say that others are not absolutely important and an important part of the fabric of the livability of a community. It's more sort of about brevity and trying to just kind of pick out what stood out to us. Now these key findings are what stood out to us as researchers. And we're experts on the data, but we are not experts on Beaumont. You all are the experts on your community and know, the other piece that's missing from this and the voice of your residents. So what we're trying to do is bring in the data and kind of distill the key findings we can find from it, but it's certainly not all encompassing. There's so much more than what these slides touched on. So in the city of Beaumont, and any of the council can correct me on this if I'm wrong, we have good coverage for education, arts, and cultural activities if you're in school. And beyond that, we as a city don't have very many programs that other communities seem to have for any of these categories. So I guess you didn't get to measure that specifically because that would be applying it to Beaumont and how we do things, correct? It just wasn't one of the facets that we highlighted in the presentation, but there is a lot of data about it in the report itself. In the livability report on page 27, you can see the ratings for education, arts, and culture, for instance.
Okay.
And most of those items were lower than the benchmark. Overall opportunity for education, culture, and the arts was rated as 32% excellent or good and was lower than the benchmark.
Okay.
Opportunities to attend special events and festivals, community support for the arts, those were lower than the benchmark. I would say, it's difficult during a pandemic to ask people about opportunities to attend special events or cultural opportunities or any kind of event, because in most places they're canceled right now. So that can be a little tricky, but they were ratings that were of lower quality than.
All right. Okay. Thank you. I'm glad you have data on it. And that really was the source of the question.
Absolutely.
I saw it here and then I did not see it mentioned in any other slide. So if you've got data on that, then I do care about the data. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
All right.
I think all of it is important, and there's so much more data than what was covered on the slide. So that's a great point.
Okay, I'll open it up to the rest of council, but I may have another question later.
Okay. Can I, another interjection on that, after this, I'll give it to Mayor Pro Tem. On the, Nancy, on this livability on the faucets on this, she mentioned about the education, culture, and the arts is 32% on if you rate it, put a rating on that on excellent or good, they're 32%. But if it is essential or very important, it's very important. It's 78%. So looking on the charts on here on the screen, so it tells us that really very, very important. The one on top of this on this chart is the Beaumont is feeling safe in Beaumont is really high. I mean you're looking around at 94% on this. Being excellent is 67. It's the highest rating on that. Is that correct? Just reading on the information you got.
That's correct. All of the facets were rated as essential or very important by a strong majority of respondents. And what you're seeing here in this chart is those importance ratings in relation to the benchmark, the quality and importance relations in relating to the benchmark. So safety was of similar importance when compared to the benchmark and similar quality when compared to the benchmark, but 94% of respondents rated safety as essential or very important. That's just a similar percentage to what we see in other communities because safety typically always comes out on top when we ask residents what's important. So almost all said it was important, but it comes out as similar in terms of relative importance, if that makes sense.
Very good. Thank you for that information. Okay, go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem Mike. Laura?
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, you're welcome.
A couple of questions. Help me to understand how you've got a population in the city of about 50,000. We get a response of, say, 1%. How do you extrapolate that out so that this gives a good overall picture of how everybody in the community is feeling?
Sure. So to determine sample sizes, typically the standard sample size we recommend in communities with the NCS basic service is about 1,700. And Beaumont chose to expand that sample size to 2,500 total households. And the reason why we typically recommend that response rate of 1,700 is that with the average response rates we see, that should get us to close to 400 responses, which gets us to a margin of error of plus or minus 5% around the data. And that can work for any sample size. You'll see national polls that are of 400 adults across the US, and that's still a margin of error of plus or minus 5%. Beaumont chose to expand the sample size. The overall response rate was 26%, which is a very strong response rate for this kind of study. 649 completed surveys from the scientific, which gave us a margin of error of plus or minus 4%. So these numbers are based on recommendations from APOR, the American Association for Public Opinion Research. And while they sound small, they do work with a 95% confidence interval for even much larger populations. It's sort of one analogy I like to give people is as long as it's stirred well, and you know that you don't have to eat the whole pot of soup to know how it tastes, or the whole bowl of soup. You can have, you can have a spoonful of it and understand. And so other things we do to make sure that the sample is scientific is that we make sure that it's random. We make sure that we look at USPS lists that are updated on a quarterly basis. We geocode those lists. We make sure that we're looking only at residences within city limits of Beaumont. We look at the difference between multifamily and single family households, because that can help us be a proxy for some non-response bias that we tend to see in surveys like this. We intentionally slightly oversample multifamily units. And then we also weight the data. As I mentioned, we look at the most recent census data. available for the city and compare that to the sociodemographic responses on the survey. There's a lot of information about this in the technical appendices report. You can see some detailed methodology. But that way we're very certain that it's a representative sample of the community as a whole.
Okay, and so, and I noticed that you don't include any of the online surveys because if I understand correctly, in short, you can't verify who filled those out, whether it was a citizen of the city of Beaumont or somebody else, correct?
We did keep those responses separate, so you can find those under separate cover. Because those are folks that opted in and self-selected themselves to respond.
Right.
We did keep the responses separate. It's true, it's possible they came from outside of the city. We find that is rare. It's somewhat of a time commitment to take the survey. It takes about 20 minutes.
Right.
So probably in the instance if they weren't a resident, perhaps they're a business owner or something along those lines, another kind of stakeholder in the community, we would still expect that the vast majority of those respondents would be residents. But the kind of respondent that self-selects and opts in to take a survey often is somebody that's already more civically engaged in the community. Overall, we didn't do a detailed head-to-head comparison of the two sets of results. But overall, what we expect to see and typically see is that results aren't wildly different between the scientific data and the opt-in data. However, the folks that opt in tend to be more opinionated. They're less likely to select the don't know response, and they're often more likely to be civically engaged and report higher levels of civic engagement in the community.
Okay, and none of the online information or the online survey folks have been included in this within the 2,500 households that you put together, correct?
Correct. They're separate. We keep the data sets separate. It was two separate survey links.
Yeah, and it's
that separate report.
And it's formatted differently, so it's a little bit, it doesn't have all the same percentages or I guess graphs that you have in the Exhibit B, I believe.
Correct. So it's we didn't design that livability report that we base these key findings on
Right.
for the opt-in results. We do recommend that you focus on the scientific results in terms of, for recommendations and decision making. But of course, it's still important to look at the opt-in results. And so what we provide with those are tables that mirror the tables you'll see in the technical appendices report of the scientific results. And also, they also have the opportunity to respond to that same open-ended question. We didn't summarize those results, but you can see them in alphabetical order, the comments in the opt-in result.
Okay, well, back to the scientific results. One of the concerns that I have, and maybe you could help me understand it better, is under Exhibit B on page 9 under governance. The way that I'm reading that, it looks like nobody's happy with existing governance at this point in time. Am I reading that correctly?
Just looking at that in the report.
Looking at that report, yeah, we have a 36% rating of poor, 20% rating of good, 41% rating of fair.
So the overall confidence in city government, correct, that was about 24%, excellent or good. That is lower than the benchmark. So that is lower than the national benchmark. It's lower than what we typically see. A lot of those measures were, some were on par with comparison communities, treating all residents fairly, overall customer service by city employees, public information services. Those were all on par with the national benchmarks. And a majority gave positive ratings to the overall quality of services provided by the city, public information services, overall customer service. So that was another area we did not highlight in the presentation as we talked about with the arts and education piece. As I mentioned, there's just a lot of data, so
Right.
I'm glad you're asking about it.
Okay. That's all my questions for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I add on that to clarify also on the households in here? I know our household here in Beaumont is around 14,000. So that's based on the 14,000, the 2,500 household that sample in here. Is that correct? That's why we got the 26%. That's based on the household instead of the population.
Right, we sample households, not individuals.
That's correct.
So when we're creating the sample, we're looking at the number, all households within the city are eligible to be selected. We actually have language in the cover letters that we mail with the survey packets that asks that the adult in the household that is 18 or over, that most recently had a birthday, be the one to complete the survey. We call that called the birthday method. We try and randomize who we're hearing from within households that way. So it's not just like a self-selected head of household, but whoever the adult is that most recently had a birthday be the one to complete it.
That's a good point. Thank you, Mayor, for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for a clarification on that. Also, let me go on the governance on this. You touch on that, Mayor Pro Tem. I mean, if we look in there on the benchmark, we're really low on those, rating on that. Is it this was based on, because we did the survey around, I think, we started sending out around February, March, and then April, we got the response on that. So, does it, reflect on the previous or not? I mean, that's my question on Mayor Pro Tem, statement he made in there. This is good. I mean, the government performance is so low. I mean, it's so low. I mean, if I look in here on the other side, this is disappointing. I mean, but understanding the time we got this survey was back in March or April on this. But thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for bringing out this in here. Next will be, Council Lloyd White, please.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. So I had a couple of comments. First of all, I didn't see a whole lot of surprises. I think we all know that infrastructure and traffic are a big deal in our area, and it's something that we are focusing a lot of time on. In regards to the governance issue, I don't think that's unexpected with everything we've been through the last 5 or 6 years. We still have a long ways to go to earn back the trust. I'm sort of disappointed that we didn't do this before. I'm happy we've finally done something like this, because I can imagine in 2014 most people thought our government was doing a great job. So I don't put a whole lot of stake in that aspect of it, but I do know that we all recognize that we have the transparency. I mean, I think we're one of the most transparent governments around, yet we ranked lower at 30% on being open and transparent to the public. So I know we have a long way to go on that. And then, and I expected public safety and environment and quality of life to be things that are going to be relatively good for us, because I think people really enjoy living here. But I do have some questions that, you mentioned that you guys are the experts. So I want to talk to you a little bit more about the survey itself and some of what you take away from it. So explain to me what the follow-up postcard is.
So essentially the way the NCS is structured is that there's what we call the NCS basic service, and then there's different ways jurisdictions can augment that service, different kinds of add-on options they can select. So with the basic service, it's 3 contacts. There's a pre-notification postcard to the randomly selected households. Then there is the mailing of the first survey packet with a postage paid return envelope, a cover letter with instructions, and they also get a link to complete the survey online if they prefer to do so. That's in the cover letter. Then a week later, they get an almost identical second survey packet, so a third mailing. The only difference is the language in the cover letter acknowledges that this is the second packet being sent, and if you've already completed it, there's no need to do so. To complete this one, please go ahead and recycle it. So typically with the basic service, there's those 3 mailings because a multi-contact mailed survey is still the best way to get the strongest kind of response rate. Beaumont chose to add, for a pretty minimal price, an additional follow-up postcard. So it was a fourth mailing, a reminder postcard with the web link, just reminding folks. And that can typically help response rate by a couple of percentage points. And it's an option some of our communities select to help maximize response rate.
Okay, and when, so basically you are done with us on this first go round. When would you typically recommend that a city the size of Beaumont repeat this? Are we looking a couple of years, more than a couple of years? Give me an idea, the best practice.
That's a great question. The most common cycle is every 2 years, every other year to complete the survey. And that's what most of the jurisdictions we work with do. Some communities do conduct the survey annually. That often tends to be the larger cities and counties that we work with. It kind of depends on resources and how much you're able to move the needle in between survey administrations. Most communities choose the every other year method. That being said, we do offer other types of specialty surveys. So some communities do the NCS every other year, but in the off year, they may do an internal employee survey or a survey of businesses, or we have a specific police services survey. So there's the potential to do that. And now also because National Research Center, who created the National Community Survey back in 2001, last year in 2019, we merged with Polko, which has an online civic engagement platform. And because you participated in the NCS, you have full access to the Polko suite of tools. So if you wanted to ask some targeted questions of your community online for free, say you wanted to dig deeper into that pool question, or kind of gauge 6 months from now what people are thinking about it, if things have shifted and priorities may have changed, then you do have that opportunity to use the Polko platform, and that wouldn't be any additional cost to you. We're happy to help you with that.
Okay, that's good to hear. I think we could really employ these specific online survey questions. And so my final issue that I wanted to bring up is, I'm very familiar with data analysis. It's what I do every day for work. And sometimes I'll run reports for different sales areas or different products. And as a person who does sales analysis, but not a salesperson or not someone who's out in the field working with our customers, I will take a report back and just think to myself, wow, that area is really high, or that area is really low, or boy, that's surprising. And I don't think it's that surprising to people who are receiving the reports, because as I told you at the start of my conversation here, we understand our city. We know where we think we should do well and not do well. But I'd like to find out from you if there were things that jumped out at you that made Beaumont unique, good or bad, in some of the areas that you looked at.
I think overall, that's where those key findings come into play. Those are kind of the key takeaways that we found in the data. And hopefully, I'm glad to hear you say that, because hopefully they aren't surprises to you. And usually they're not. Areas where you're really excelling, or areas that maybe, specifically areas of challenge, shouldn't come as a surprise. And hopefully the data reaffirms what you do know about your community, but helps kind of give you some, a foundation to build on. And also it should really be representative of the community as a whole. And, often in communities we work with, they maybe hear from a handful of the same very active and vocal residents over and over again that say that they're speaking for everyone, when really the full picture might tell a somewhat different story when you're giving everybody a chance to have a voice in the conversation. So that's really our goal with the results.
Okay, and just to touch on the next time we do this, would you and we went a little bit above the basic this time, would you recommend in 2 years that we continue that trend, or should we just do maybe the basic next time, and then a couple of years later come back with a little bit more in detail?
It depends on what your goals are, and so when it's time for the next one, we're happy to, if you want to change up the options or remove some of them, we're happy to talk you through that. In 2 years we might have some other kinds of features. Because we have merged with Polko, we're offering kind of more automated features and We've been able to reduce costs on some of these kinds of things because we're doing them in more automated ways. So it's possible that in 2 years we can perhaps have a lower price point and more features, which
Okay.
is a
Thank
cool
you.
direction to be going in, because that hasn't been the way we historically have been going.
Thank you. Mayor, that's all I have.
Very good, thank you. After this, I'll just, a quick comment on this, will be Council Nancy Carroll. Quickly on this, I mean, looking on the data you have in here, is the place to visit. I mean, like Councilor Lloyd White mentioned about the, what's the factor on that? I mean, place to visit. It's really, really good number. I mean, you're talking about 71, 72% on this, Can you comment on that? Where's that, place to visit is so high on this?
See, I'm seeing 37% saying place to visit is excellent or good. Place to live was that over 75%
Yeah.
overall quality of life in neighborhoods. But about 37% saying the city as a place to visit was excellent or good. And, you are against, the other communities in our database, while there's hundreds of them, a lot of them are really high performing organizations and a lot of them are resort communities. So, for place to visit, you're competing with Honolulu and Maui and Miami and Park City, Utah, and a lot of places out here in Colorado where we're based. So I think that can be a harder measure.
Yeah, because I'm just curious on that, why we have 71% to 72% place to visit. So, thank you. Go ahead, Councilor Carroll.
Thank you, Mayor. When we look to maybe doing this in the future, can we and do you ever code the responses so that you can do a further slice on the data, where you could look at the responses and say, from this particular area of the city, this was their concern, this is what they thought was going well, this is where they didn't have enough information. Do you ever put into this an ability to slice it deeper so that then the city can go respond and say, this is maybe a large community within the city that isn't getting the message, or that we need to hear more about why they don't feel like we're doing a good enough job of representing them, or what their particular needs are? Do you ever slice it in response by the area so that you could actually feed us back that information in a proactive plan?
Yes, absolutely. That is we have a couple of add-on options that do that now, that just weren't ones the city selected this time around, but we can geocode the sample. So, if there's wards or districts or some kind of meaningful geographic split in the city, we can geocode the sample that way and then break the results out by sub-geography of the city. And we can also do demographic subgroup comparisons, where we can break the results out by some of the socio-demographic questions on the survey. So length of residency, age, ethnicity, race, household income, those kinds of things. Those are all additional kinds of analyses we can do. And in the future, we think we'll have the availability for you to be able to look at that on an online dashboard as well. So that's one of the things that we're working on, getting even more automated so that that's even easier to get.
Thank you. I would think that would be extraordinarily useful. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Very good. I'll jump in on that. I mean, because we have the disadvantaged community in here. That would be nice to identify that on next report when we do proceed this. That would be a great number to see on that disadvantaged community. Thank you. Council? Anybody else? I think we're doing well. Did you raise your hand now, Lloyd? Oh, Council Lloyd?
No, I'm
No.
good.
Okay, you're good. Todd?
Well, this is really set up as a report offer the opportunity of council to review this, ask our consultants any specific questions, which, Mayor, it sounds like we've worked through that process. So at this point, our next step would begin to digest this information internally within the city staff, to begin to evaluate this against our CIPs, against some of our other programming efforts. And as we begin to get into additional budget workshops with city council, we would anticipate utilizing this as an additional guidance document that helps us prioritize and establish our programming moving forward.
Very good. I really appreciate this. This is a good report. You could see the statistics and everything. Even the, on our staff. I mean, regarding the customer service is doing excellent job. I mean, looking in there, that's amazing. I mean, of course, there's a lot of areas on our staff that we have to improve. It's nice also to see the safety, line item in there. It's really, really good, and on even up to 94%. I love that. I mean, seeing it. I think we're going in the right direction, Council. I mean, just keep on doing it. So, if there's no other, questions, I could, make a motion to receive and file this report. Make a motion.
Mayor, I'll move to receive and file the report.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Councilmember White,
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez,
Yes.
Councilmember Carroll,
Yes,
Mayor Pro Tem Lara,
Yes.
Mayor Santos.
Yes. On this, before I adjourn this, very welcome, and Steve, welcome. I mean, we have to adjourn the meeting, but nice seeing you, and say to everybody in here, I adjourn the meeting at 6